Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm back at it again. This is Sandra Sheffrere, president of the Democratic Women's Club of Greater Broward. And just like I've been for the last couple of weeks, I've been taking an opportunity to give the candidates a chance to interview, to speak with us, basically to chat with us so we can get a full, view or full idea of what it is that they want to do for the offices that they're running for. I know they're participating in so many panels and they're exhausted. I'm glad that she found some time to come talk to me, but I really just wanted to give each candidate an opportunity to really just develop what it is that they want to do for whatever position that they're running for. So today we're talking to Teresa Fanning Williams. She's one of the candidates for Broward County State Attorney. Go ahead and introduce yourself and then we'll start this chat.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I really appreciate you doing this afternoon. I'd love to give a shout out to all the great ladies of the Democratic Women's Club of Greater Fort Lauderdale. Some of you may remember me as your former past president or your immediate past president of the Democratic Women's Club of West Broward. So we are a sister organization. And Sandra, I so enjoyed working with you when we did the Christmas gift drive.
Yes.
for ARC. We've done some really great events, and
Yes.
such a pleasure to work with you trying to bring forward our democratic values through our community. So thank you for all that you do.
And I have to tell you, not to interrupt, but I'm telling you, like, she's the best at wrapping Christmas gifts. Okay. There were some of those gifts that were like the craziest shape, and Teresa got on the floor, man, and she wrapped those things up, and she did it quickly. So I have to tell you that, you got a crazy gift to wrap. Bring it to Teresa. She's like
it's a hidden talent, most definitely, Sandra. And you know what? I'd like to offer, assistance with Santa's workshop over at the house, which I do every season.
I'm telling you.
For moms that need some help, we're here for you.
Yes.
I also wanted to take the opportunity to bring out, I know that some of the women in your organization are also members of one of the greatest sororities that we have available in South Florida that I so unfortunately did not realize were on a forum with us last night. I so apologize to Delta Sigma Theta, I hope that I'm saying that correctly, to the wonderful ladies who are members of the Deltas. I so apologize for not shouting you out last night. And you know what? We've had so many forums, as Sandra talked about earlier on. I did not realize that the Deltas were part of the call. And again, I so apologize for that oversight. I would really enjoyed being able to speak with both groups when I ran in 2016 against the 40-year incumbent to be your Broward County State Attorney. And then as now, what I'm really looking to do is bring a balanced approach to criminal justice reform that's based on 25 years of experience and one that I think is right for our community. I've really taken the opportunity to get out and in the past 5 years, get out and really sit down and talk to people. And I really do feel that I have gone out and immersed myself in some of the issues that many of my other candidates may have a very different perspective. And I'm really hopeful to be able to bring some innovative and new ideas and an entire clean slate to Broward County when it comes to criminal justice. I feel like we are on the verge of criminal justice reform. We have some incredible things that are happening in criminal justice now, and I think that I'm the right candidate to bring us forward into the future. So Sandra, did you have anything specific that
No. We're definitely gonna talk. No. I wanted you. No. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today.
Oh,
I just wanted to make sure you got your intro in, and one of the questions that we always start off with is like, what made you want to run? What makes you want to put all your business out in the streets like this? I mean, you ran in 2016, so we know that it's definitely something that you want to do. But why do you want to expose yourself to all this scrutiny and put people all up in your business? What is it that call did you hear that made you want to do this?
Well, you know what? One day I may write a book about this whole thing, and it's going to be a pretty good one.
Yeah, sure. We all have stories to tell.
I know, right? I started my career as a prosecutor in Miami-Dade County, and you know what? I was always taught to do the right thing, and we were taught to do it the right way, and I thought that people were just, completely wrong about criminal justice. I was like, we aren't like that. We don't do that. I failed to understand that the big picture of what happens in our state is most certainly extremely different than the way that I was taught. And I was flat out slapped in the face with that after spending 10 years as prosecutor when I started my own law firm in Broward County. I ultimately served as the division chief of the career criminal robbery unit. I was responsible for training lawyers how to exercise discretion, looking at the different factors that came into play when you decide what's an appropriate sentence for somebody. And when I got to this county and I realized that nobody cared about any of those things, that the only thing that really mattered to them were what the sentencing guidelines were and what the minimum mandatory was, and fairness, being fair to my client, that really wasn't out there either.
So I have a
The
question.
premise was let the jury decide.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I might do that every now and then, especially when
No worries, go for it.
I'm not going to just let that slide, right? So you said something about you said that you trained attorneys to exercise discretion, right? Yes. What does that really mean? Because because one of the things I spoke to a couple of the sheriff candidates, I was in that forum that you talked about yesterday where the North Broward Deltas and AKAs put that forum together. And one of the things that came up a couple of times was implicit bias, right? So how is it that you train someone to exercise discretion and they may have an issue of implicit bias? Because then at that point, they're going to pick and choose who it is that they want to help. So how do you train someone to exercise discretion without addressing the issue of implicit bias? Or I shouldn't assume that you didn't, just in case you did or not.
On day one, we have to address implicit bias, okay? And right now, our system doesn't do that at all. Where there is statistical data that shows us that criminal justice treats people differently as a result of their race, we have to acknowledge that, basically deal with that. And we deal with that by immersive training in implicit bias. Now, that's not just a 5-hour, course. What that basically is going to inquire for our state attorney's office in the 17th Circuit is essentially reprogramming the thought process of our prosecutors. This is going to have to be immersive and literally getting down to how they actually think about a case. Because what's been encouraged is to treat another human being like a number, to treat another human being like the quote from Amy Bloom, the prosecutor who was just fired. Her quote was comparing protesters to animals. Okay, that is the thought process and the culture that we're trying to change. So implicit bias training will be every single day.
Okay, so what if when you're doing all this training, there's no buy-in? What if you have some state attorneys that are just like, no, I don't like this new school stuff that you're trying to bring into this office? What do you do with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? A good supervisor knows the people that they supervise. And basically a good supervisor is standing in the courtroom, watching what's happening, looking at statistics, looking at results. Having been an exceptionally good supervisor for a long period of time at the state attorney's office, I could tell you exactly who my problem people were. And I can also tell you that the criminal defense bar in this county knows exactly who the problem people are over at the Broward County State Attorney's Office. How do you do it? You establish a good relationship with the criminal defense bar so that they know that they can come to you and openly communicate about problems and issues that they're seeing. Second, you create a statistical database so that you're able to pinpoint problems that are occurring in reference to the results of cases by looking at numbers and being able to show that person a pattern of behavior in order to change the way that they're conducting themselves. And third, you need to have training that is conducted inside of the courtroom, not simply with somebody sitting in an ivory tower getting the washed out version of what they're actually doing inside the courtroom. I feel very confident that I'm going to be able to weed out the problematic people in our office and change the entire culture of how our state attorney's office currently works.
Okay, so there's definitely a wave of some prosecutors that are doing things a little bit differently, right? Kim Fox in Chicago, we have Larry Krasner in Pennsylvania, Rachel Rollins, Amaris Ayala, she was a state attorney in Orlando who just decided to not run for re-election. One of the things that she decided that she was not going to pursue the death penalty in any case case and it became an issue. And also Kimberly Gardner, she was the prosecutor in St. Louis, Missouri, city attorney in St. Louis, Missouri. She came in with some ideas and she lost her entire staff. What if you get into the office day one and they realize they're like, I'm not going to work for this Teresa Fannin Williams lady. What are you going to do with that?
Well, you know what? For the past 10 years, I've been developing a rapport with quite a few prosecutors. Many of them are ones who are completely miserable at that office. And quite a few of them come to me to be mentored. I listen. I am that shoulder for them to cry on when they feel that they're being mistreated. And so I don't think I'm going to have that problem, Sandra. I have an established reputation in this courthouse for being a straight shooter that is fair but tough, and I am not going to accept what everybody seems to think just is what we have to deal with. I took the bull by the horns and ran against the 40-year incumbent because I refused to accept a system that worked to just make people money and get people reelected. When I did that, I got the respect of a lot of people that work in that courthouse. And I do believe that I can get the young lawyers that work there to open their minds and learn. And those who, and there are going to be some that are never going to open their minds to the type of change that we need to make. Those people need to be identified and eradicated. We need to be able to pull in the type of talent to be able to fill the spots of people who have decades of experience. I'm being called on a regular basis by the people who worked underneath me when I was the division chief of the career criminal robbery unit, when I was a homicide supervisor, when I worked in the sexual battery unit. I've got a wealth of information and a wealth of candidates to pick from in order to be able to restaff this office. And I have an implementation plan already into effect that involves a new class that will come into effect in January. And we'll have a staged process for essentially people who will be placed on probation will be given an opportunity, but if they're not able to change the way they think, they're going to need to move on. And I'm ready for that.
And with that, with a new group that might be coming in January, with the possibility that some people are going to be like, I don't want no parts of this and I'm leaving, right? What do you plan on doing? How is it that you're going to decide who you're going to bring into the office? I think I was listening to one forum and they said it might be like 5 or 8 men of color that work for the state attorney's office or something like that. I didn't hear what the number of females are. You're going to make an effort to diversify the office. And I don't only mean people of color. I mean, maybe trans people, just make sure that the office represents the community that they're there to serve.
Okay. Well, first I have lunch plans on Friday with Tatiana Williams, who I believe her organization is Transgender Central. I'm not positive about the name, but I'm sitting down and talking to her about some of the concerns that the transgender community has that need to be incorporated into criminal justice reform. I most certainly am planning on creating a workforce that is diversified, not only just in reference to, do we have Black and brown people and white people and women and men, but I also think that we have a lot of cultural diversity in our county. Absolutely. We have Haitian Americans, we have Jamaican Americans, we have African Americans, we have Bahamian Americans, we have large pockets where there are very, very strong cultural influences that are very diverse from each other. And so I think that all of those cultures also need to be represented. What needs to happen is we need to have a team that's diversified, but also a part of our team needs to be people that have a different skill set so that we're all working off of each other and benefiting each other in a team approach. We need to be diversified, and we need to be not only diversified, but we need to be skilled and efficient. And together, we're going to create the team that's going to bring us into the future of criminal justice.
So my next question is gonna lead into one issue that we want to talk about, but I'm also going to give a little bit of a fact pattern. So when you were talking about that multicultural team that you're going to put together, you gave a shout out to both of mine. I'm Bahamian and I'm also Haitian and I'm an American too, right? And I practice immigration law. So I had a client that was in immigration proceedings for beating their kid. Right? The charge was child abuse, no harm. He had another issue too, but like once we added the child abuse, no harm, which is a felony to it, he found himself being deported. he was actually maybe Peruvian or something like that. But from the islands, the Caribbean, South America, they believe in spanking their children. Like, what can we do with that to not have someone, who really may not understand that you can't be out here beating your kids, but that's the way they were raised. And then now he's facing deportation, could be separated from his kid forever. Like, I'm going to ask an immigration question afterwards, because that's a consideration that I think the state attorneys should take into consideration when they're making decisions about how they're going to charge. What would you do with a scenario like that, where the person really just didn't know that they shouldn't do that?
I got it. I understand.
The law is no excuse, but they really didn't know they shouldn't do that.
Listen, I completely understand. And I have got an entire client base who is in the situation that your client was in. I'm currently litigating a case right now where DCF came to the house, took a look at the child, left the child in the house, gave the mom a parenting plan, everything was fine. 2 months later, state attorney's office filed a warrant against this woman, and she was held in custody for 3 months. I've seen some very egregious circumstances where the state attorney's office refuses to exercise its discretion and consider the cultural background of individuals who are being accused with this particular offense. Now, I most certainly am going to take that into account. I'm also going to take into account the fact that as I've sat down and gone through this community, I've sat down with people and have asked them, were you physically punished as a child? How do you think these cases should be addressed in the criminal justice system? And people have turned to me and said, you know what? Yes, I was physically punished, and I think I'm a better person as a result. The 17th Circuit is currently prosecuting people for doing what a significant portion of this community does, which is discipline their children. Now, listen, you know what? I don't want to really get into what the law is that parents do not have blanket permission to discipline their children.
Absolutely.
And the case law basically says that, listen, you're running a pretty big risk when you do that, because we're letting you know that this is really a matter of degree. We need to educate people about that. We need to make sure that people in our community are understanding that this is what the law is, that here are some of the factors that come into play, but I'm going to have the discretion also to really decide when those laws should be applied and when it is appropriate parental discipline. I really want to start a dialogue about, what are the effects of physically disciplining our children? Are they good? Are they bad? Let's really start exploring this as a community. And I'm hopeful that, we're going to be respecting the cultures of the people who live here, number one. Number two, we're not going to be criminalizing people for doing what is sometimes appropriate in light of a child's behavior, or maybe some people view that not appropriate, but that's their opinion.
Right.
And we need to make sure that everybody understands what the law is, particularly in light of the fact that we have people coming to our area directly from these countries where this is completely acceptable, permissible, and approved.
Yes, and it's one of the, and it's a little bit more than that, because a parent spanks a child once doesn't mean that that's what they have to do all the time, right? That was one of the way, my parents spanked me when I was growing up, and that just made me realize that I can't try my mother, right? Because I was afraid of her, and I loved her, and I know she loved me, but there was some level of fear. There are parents that are raising kids, and the kids aren't afraid of them because they're like, listen, I'm gonna call 911 on you, so you've lost control of your house because you have no power in your home.
Yeah, that's out there.
We definitely need to educate the community, but I also think the law needs, they kind of need to look at that, because at the end of the day, if you're raising some kid that's not afraid of you, the minute they get into trouble with a police officer, what's the first thing they do is knock them on the ground, lay them on the ground, hit them with a club, do whatever. And I don't want to say that's the first thing the cop does, but typically, oftentimes that's where it ends up, where the police officer has to use physical force on this child to get them to cooperate, but the parent was trying to do that before, and then they're like a felon because of it, right? So that's part of it. So that's definitely a conversation that needs to be had, that's something that needs to be addressed. There has to be some sort of meeting of the minds, because really kids shouldn't lose the right to have their parent in their life because of something like that, because people are literally getting deported for this. And it's not, I'm not even exaggerating the situation. So it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. So on the issue of immigration, right? So I have another client who, and this ain't really all about me, but this is really one of the concerns that are in Broward County,
Yeah.
who ended up getting arrested in part of one of those like little, you know how they have the female cop pretend to be a prostitute, so he got picked up for soliciting. The charges ended up getting dismissed because he completely didn't understand what was going on or anything like that. So the charge was dismissed. But what happened was he was transferred over to ICE, to immigration. And once you're detained, you know, he's not going to get out. So he's also going to get deported, even though he doesn't have a conviction. What's going to be your position with notifying ICE if you have someone in the courtroom that doesn't have lawful status in the United States?
I don't work for ICE. ICE doesn't work for me. I am not going to have another agency have that type of pull or power in my agency. I do not enforce immigration laws. In fact, I think that I do want to consider immigration consequences, but one of the things that really bothers me is when people use immigration status to threaten people and intimidate them into not prosecuting or not coming forward. So I definitely want to address that. And so when I'm addressing that, I say that immigration status should not matter. But we definitely need to consider the circumstances that will happen to somebody as a result of being convicted. And that's most definitely a factor that needs to come into play. I will not be an arm of ICE ever.
Okay. All righty. All right, so juveniles. The other question that came up last night and through all these other formats is that Broward County is notorious for charging juveniles as adults, right? I teach at in some of the criminal justice program at some of the universities, and that's like one of those hot button topics that we have all the time. You know, and they talk about brain development, all of these different things. What is your position on direct filing juveniles into adult court?
Well, you know what? One of the things that one of the things that motivated me to run is working with juvenile offenders. When I started working with my clients that were in their early 20s, I would just meet these guys that were just so funny, cute, charming, intelligent, talented. And here is this kid that was looking at life in state prison, and his entire future is in my hands. And it was seeing just the total lack of, just lack of empathy that in regard to that was just exhibited by the attorneys at the state attorney's office, which really, really prompted me to run. I saw my clients being abused. One of them was a young man who had no prior record, was 17 years old, and was standing outside of a house while his co-defendant, who had a significant record, was inside of the house handing him the property, committing a burglary. One of the boxes that he picked up had a gun in it. And this young man gave a full confession and stated, I took the box and I saw it had a gun in it. The state attorney's office charged him with an armed burglary, which made it mandatory to charge him as an adult, where they could have just charged him with the burglary to a dwelling and grand theft of a firearm, and he would have stayed in the juvenile division. I have fought to keep this young man out of state prison for probably it's got to be 7 years at this point, because he's in a never-ending trap of adult court probation that is as a result of the fact that he's just extremely immature. And, and he gets pulled over literally weekly in the neighborhood that he lives in. And so, I have personal experience in seeing the toll on human life that these types of decisions make on people. And when you direct file an individual and just give them decades in prison, and without any thought of the fact that this person who's 18 or 17 years old is going to be an entirely different human being in 5 years. You didn't even give him a chance.
Right.
We really need to take a look at what we're doing as far as direct files. Now, I've sat down with the head of the Severn Poverty Law Center and really talked about the types of best practices that ought to be put into place. And they're trying to develop best practices by looking at all of the different ways that direct file decisions are approached throughout the nation. So I'm watching very carefully what their parameters are. But one of the things that we're going to be doing is a committee approach on the front end of that decision before the child when the case first comes in. And I want to create a committee that's filled with psychologists, social workers, with attorneys, with people that are part of the Department of Juvenile Justice, educators, community leaders that are basically really looking towards prevention and solutions to prevent this person from going on the path to the state prison pipeline, and really looking towards any way that we can resolve a matter and still protect public safety while keeping a juvenile in the juvenile system. It's one of my goals to significantly reduce direct file, and I'm very confident that you're going to see that reduction when I become the state attorney.
Yes, and that's important too. And I have 2 points I want to make on that. I remember this was some years ago, but it was in Dade County though. There was a kid, he was like 18 years old, and he had got charged with a homicide, right? And when they were talking about him, he'd been getting arrested since he was 9. Right. So this kid had been getting in trouble since he was 9. And I'm like, is anyone surprised that he's like, he done killed somebody at this point in his life? And I think society failed him, right? Because if you have a 9-year-old that's like getting arrested, stealing and doing something, and something's going on. There need to be some services in that home, some sort of intervention. You just can't have a 9-year-old keep getting arrested, and then when he's 19 or 18 years old and he does something extremely terrible, and then all of a sudden now you want to like sentence him to life or put him on death row, when for all those years he's been crying out for help since he was 9 and no one did anything about it. So I do think we definitely need to do a more collective approach of how we address like even juveniles in the system before they get to 16, 17 years old, before they're getting into trouble. Some of them might have already been getting into trouble, and someone could be like your client, that was his first time, and then they decide to throw the book at him to not even take into consideration that he had not been in trouble for a long time. And then the other point I want to make is that, well, we're gonna hopefully get a new sheriff. I shouldn't say hopefully, that's not what I mean. So there's the sheriff there's also an election for sheriff. And I think it's important from my perspective that the sheriff, the state attorney, and the public defender's office, that they find a way to work together so we can address this whole criminal justice reform, because you guys all need each other. You all have to work together. And I think you need to be on the same page when it comes to certain issues. So communities that are over policed, and you have someone every week you see them in court on the traffic, like tell the cop, like, what are you doing, right? Like, so what efforts, if any, do you plan on making to working with BSO and with the PD's office?
Well, I have to say that I am personally acquainted with all of the candidates for sheriff of Broward County, and I am very optimistic about the future in regard to the sheriff's office. I think that most of our candidates have excellent intentions and are very capable of making the type of cultural changes that we need. I've specifically been told by both Scott Israel and Sheriff Gregory Tony that they did not have an open line of communication with the state attorney's office. I believe it without any problem whatsoever, because I've seen it in action, where I had won a motion to suppress as a criminal defense attorney and run into the police officer, and he has no idea and literally has no idea what he did wrong. So unless we're talking to each other and talking about the different things that we're seeing, we're not really making any forward progress for change in the way that our different agencies interact and interrelate with each other. I'm really looking forward to having the type of relationship of mutual respect with the sheriff. Now, as far as the public defender is concerned, you know what? I quite frankly think that the public defender and the state attorney shouldn't be the best of friends. I think that the public defender and the state attorney should have an excellent working relationship with each other, but the public defender should be calling out the state attorney at any point where the state attorney is not doing something appropriate. That is the public defender's job. And, you know, I hear a lot of criticism of Howard Finkelstein as a result of people saying that, you know, oh, there's this horrible relationship. Well, you know what? It is the job of the public defender to make sure that the Constitution is protected across the board systemically. And for there to have been 40 years where that simply just never happened, it is really a travesty. There is an entire generation of people in this county that wouldn't be convicted felons if they lived somewhere else.
Absolutely, I agree.
And we've got to acknowledge that, and we've got to change that moving forward. And I really feel that we need to have a head prosecutor who never worked for Mike Satz. When you work at that office, that's how you know how to do things. And you don't know what you don't know. Opening up these lines of communication help us to do that, learn what we don't know. And so I'm looking forward to the appropriate type of relationship that should be in our system, working together and sometimes adversarial to each other, making sure that the Constitution is protected across the board.
Right, so checks and balances of everyone on board. But there's some things that I think you guys should all be able to agree on. Like, we shouldn't be arresting homeless people and giving them $25 bonds, right? So dude is sleeping on the park bench, like, why is he getting arrested? Why is he being charged? I mean, so things like that. I think there needs to be some sort of an agreement on how we handle certain types of cases. And I think that's part of that whole defund. I think they should probably have a different word, because I think they need to reallocate resources, because there's some things that the police department are responsible for that I don't think they're the best equipped or best suited to deal with, right? So if an officer comes and sees some guy sleeping on a park bench, he shouldn't be sending this dude to jail. Like, you need to find him a place to stay, or get him some food, send him somewhere to take a shower, or give him some resources or something like that. At least that's what I would think would be the best approach. So I think maybe in that instance, there needs to be some buy-in with all three, you know, with the PD, public defender, the state attorney, and BSO on certain small level offenses, because the resources that are used to just deal with this case is far more than, I mean, it's just insane. Like, I was told that it's over $100 a night to house someone in jail. So why would you spend over $100 putting someone in jail with a $25 bond? It's so crazy to me. But
makes sense. You're right. And so those things that are nonsensical really need to be analyzed and removed from our system. And there's so much of it in our courthouse that there's things that are completely inefficient that we do just because that's the way we do it.
yeah.
And you know, instead of everybody sitting down and being logical, you know, it just doesn't seem to happen, and that needs to change.
Okay. And the other thing that's being talked about is how they're going to handle marijuana, misdemeanor marijuana cases. What's your position on that? Because some people are getting rich selling weed, and then we still got some folks going to jail.
Right. Well, first of all, I think that every marijuana case should be a civil citation if you are illegally
Every
using
misdemeanor marijuana case, or every marijuana case, period?
Well, I want to say every misdemeanor marijuana case,
Okay.
up to 20 grams, I think should be treated as a civil citation. And right now, depending on where you get pulled over, you either get treated as a civil citation, or you're in a 6-month program doing 50 community service hours, or you're spending a Saturday washing police cars and paying $500. There's no rhyme or reason to this other than people making money. So everything is treated as a civil citation under 20 grams in my administration. I do believe that for people who are selling marijuana, we now have the ability for people who are in need of marijuana to get a medical marijuana card. I want to take a look at, you know, potentially assisting people who are, and getting funding for people who can benefit from using those types of alternative methods that don't have the funds in order to be able to get a legal source of marijuana to treat their medical conditions. So I want to take a look at funding for that. But at the end of the day, I think we do need to be very careful about what is in marijuana, and whether or not it is laced with flocka, whether it is laced with cocaine, whether it's laced with PCP. I have seen many circumstances in the criminal justice system where there have been horrible circumstances that resulted from that. So I think there are a lot of different concerns, but at the end of the day, Okay, I believe that the criminalization of marijuana is somewhat a result of some racial origins. Slave owners gave their slaves marijuana to make them docile, and then started enforcing the laws against it as soon as
Prohibition when they made alcohol legal.
right. At the end of the day, it's rooted, the enforcement of marijuana is rooted in racism. And we need to acknowledge that and really start, creating making the difference towards making our criminal justice system something that everybody knows treats everyone fairly.
Okay, so you brought up something else. So you talked about marijuana being laced with other types of drugs. What about this whole idea of criminalizing addiction? I know people who get, especially if they have a crack problem or a heroin problem, one of those drugs that are very, very mind altering and controlling. And unless you have some sort of treatment or intervention, you're going to continue to get arrested for possession of crack cocaine and possession of heroin, right? So what about this idea of criminalizing addiction? If someone comes in for possession and it's pretty evident that they have a substance abuse problem, why are we sending them to prison and not to treatment?
You are 100% correct, Sandra. And not only do we do that for people who are addicted to drugs, but we do that to people who have profound mental illnesses. We basically treat their mental illness by sending them to prison and magically expecting that all the problems that they had that brought them there in the first place are now corrected because that person doesn't want to go back to prison. It's absolutely ridiculous the way that our system does the same thing over and over again that doesn't work. But nobody ever takes the bull by the horns and stops it. The reason why is because people are making money off of that.
Yes.
People are making money off of the fact that we dig our head into the sand and ignore the fact that a large portion of the crime that's committed is committed by drug addicts who are under the influence and are under the power of a devil that most better hope they never understand. And unless you have seen somebody who is addicted and consumed by an addiction, I don't think you truly understand the power of that. And nor do you truly understand the fact that sending somebody to a state prison is not going to ever fix that problem.
Solve that problem, yes.
We have got to implement, we got to switch. And again, you talk about defunding should really be called redistributing.
Yeah.
We need to stop spending the money on private prisons and we need to start spending the money on mental health. And that needs to be our next revolution for the treatment of drug addicts as well as those who have mental health problems, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. Yes. Okay. My clients, 70% of my clients have a mental health problem that is gone untreated because they were that 9-year-old kid that you're talking about, Sandra. That 9-year-old kid who started getting involved in the system probably has a severe mental health learning disability and a mental health disorder that no one was able to get him treatment for because it's next to impossible to be poor and get and manage your poverty. You have like 4 different caseworkers to make anything happen. It's next to impossible. People give up. You can't blame them. This has to stop. And so we have to stop doing the same things over and over again that don't work. I'm a person who takes the bull by the horns. I know how to make things happen. I know how to get things moving. And I know how to put together a team to implement this in the future. And I'm going to start the next mental health revolution in this county to make us a national model of what criminal justice reform should really look like.
And we definitely need that. We definitely need that. I had another situation where I had a kid, he was hearing voices, and the only way he would not hear the voices is if he was smoking weed, right? But then he kept getting pulled over and arrested for possession of marijuana, and that was the only way he could like not hear the voices. And when they put him on a prescription medication, I don't know if it was Zoloft, something really strong, Prozac, something to that effect. He was like, but it makes me feel like I'm just like a spaced out, like he's just sitting around, he's sleeping all day, not doing anything. And he was like, there needs to be a balance. There needs to be some sort of way to regulate, and how to address that. And again, his parents weren't well off to be able to take him to private doctors to check, to maybe put him on lithium or something else, where you would have to get your blood levels tested regularly to really manage what was going on. They prescribed the easiest and the cheapest thing, but it basically gave him no life, And then when he tried to figure out something that worked, they ended up getting arrested and having a criminal history that basically just continued to affect his life, because now you can't get a job, and you have all of these other issues because of being part of the system, even though what you really should have gotten was the right type of mental health treatment to start with.
Yeah,
So
and it's interesting. We need to educate people about these things. We need to go out into the community and explain to them that this is what is going on. Okay, your child, that you're able to go to a psychologist and get the help that they need. Think about all the hoops you're jumping through at school. All right, now magnify that by 100,000 and make people really understand what other people are going through in this county. People think that life is just hunky dory for everyone. They have no idea that, what, being poor causes trauma. It causes stress. It causes people to make mistakes and do stupid things. And we need to have some compassion for that. And so, at the end of the day, there needs to be a healthy balance between that compassion and the understanding that if you don't punish somebody sufficiently, you're not doing them a favor either.
right.
We need to basically have an educated, mature perspective that takes all of these factors into consideration.
Yes, and that has to and there's a lot with that too. There's one of it is being poor, and it's sometimes some of it is just being a person of color. We walk around with some level of stress like every day because like I got pulled over for a move over ticket, and I was just like, listen, cop, I just want to survive this stop. You know what I mean? And he was taken aback, but I'm like, literally, like this is some real stuff that I have to deal with because you just never know like what kind of interaction you're gonna have with the police, and you're riding around in fear, and that's another level of anxiety and stress that you operate with every day. I'm not wealthy or anything like that, but I'm not what you would call poor at all either. But I still walk around with a lot of stress and worried. And I'm an attorney and I'm educated and I have all of these check things that you would think that I would be able to just drive around with ease, but I'm still operating in a space that I'm like, I'm in total like stress mode if I have any interaction with the police when it's simple as something as a traffic ticket, because most of these men and women that lost their lives at the hand of law enforcement, it started off with something as simple as that they were about to get a traffic ticket, and now they're like some hashtag, and that we're dealing with say their name and all these type of things when it was a innocent. It should have been a very simple interaction, but it ended up being something that was tragic in those instances. So some of it is poor, and it's just very educated people of color are walking around and driving around with a lot of stress because we don't know. Even though we think we did all of the things right, it's like go to college, get a good job, do all of this stuff, and your life should be fine. And we do all of these things, and we still find ourselves in a situation where we're like, oh Lord, am I gonna lose my life in some really tragic type of way? So
I had to tell you something, Sandra. I as a person that's been part of the criminal justice system for 25 years, I want to apologize to you. I really do, because wow, it's so it's poignant that you are saying this, that this is how you have to feel. And and looking at what we are seeing, what I have seen happening for a very, very long time, okay, and what people that didn't know are starting to see, the fact that you feel that way is something that is so disturbing to me, and something that I am committed to changing. I want you to know that if you or somebody that you care about has been the victim of a crime or is charged with a crime, that when you walk into this courthouse, you're going to be treated fairly. And I'm so upset and disturbed that
and I have to tell you, every time I walk into Broward County's courthouse, they think I'm somebody's mother. They're like, where's your kid? Who are you here for? And I'm like, well, I am somebody's mother, but my kid is not in the courthourthouse today. And that's not why I'm here.
That's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
All levels. All levels.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed by that.
And it happens, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I'm very committed to changing that.
Yeah.
And so, we need to make sure we don't need to we need to change the culture of how people are interacting with police officers. I have been saying for years that I see a military infrastructure in our police departments that is basically crossing over into how we interact with the public. We are not a foreign country that is being invaded. We are, and there is a mindset and a culture behind that that most definitely needs to change. So I'm going to be creating a confidential informant hotline for police officers who don't feel comfortable reporting other police officers in the current culture that they have right now. We're going to be doing a swift, quick response to all police shooting cases, because Sandra, you know that in the past they just waited 2 years before they would make an announcement, and then they'd send it to a blind grand jury and basically hide behind them and say, oh, it wasn't us who didn't indict this officer, it was the grand jury.
Yes.
We had nothing to do with it. That has got to change.
Yeah.
And I also, I'm the person, since I've been out for like 4 years, I listen when I hear this. As a mother, okay, I have a 6'3" child that I am afraid, because he is large. As if I was a Black woman and I had a Black son, I would be absolutely petrified. And the fact that I can say that gives me chills. And that is so wrong. I know that the right person can change this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the wrong person might get elected in this county.
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Let's hope that does not happen. Okay, we have got to create change, and so we need to take a look at what's going to happen in November. We need to be looking forward in reference to the fact that there's a Republican candidate with 25 years of experience, and we need to put up a Democratic candidate that is commensurate in experience, or we may lose the seat. And so, you know, where I'm at is I'm ready. I've been planning this. I have got some amazing, fresh ideas, and I'm committed, truly committed, to bringing this change. And you know that, because I threw down against a 40-year incumbent. I threw my entire world upside down for criminal justice reform. I had the straw that broke the camel's back way too many times happen to me in that courthouse. And I picked up the sword because I refuse to let another human being be treated the way I saw my clients being treated. I know I'm the right person for this, and I hope you give me the opportunity to make it happen by voting for me.
Yes, and we're going to talk about the ideas you have, but I have one more point that I wanted to address before we get there. I mean, you know, we're going to be wrapping up soon. So, death penalty. Where do you stand on the death penalty?
Well, here's where I am at the death penalty. I personally disagree with the death penalty for a lot of reasons. Number one, it can't be undone. And we are number one in the state for people being exonerated by DNA in light of wrongful convictions. Some of those people have actually been put to death on death row or died from cancer after serving sentences in prison waiting on death row.
When you say number one, you mean Broward County is number one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Number one. We are well known in this state for the fact that we have had several major cases come back showing that the person who went to death row, Jesse Tavella, the gentleman who, or Jesse I'm trying to, his last name is escaping me. Sonny Jacobs Linder's co-defendant. He was the gentleman whose head was set on fire with a sponge that they got at Walmart upstate when they put him to death. That case was subsequently the people were exonerated. It's the subject of a movie called The Exonerated.
Wow.
You know, I mean, there are some things that have happened in this county when you look back at false confessions and nobody was prosecuted for them. You know, police officers clearly planted details, and nothing was ever done. There are some very, very tragic circumstances that have happened in this county. And again, as far as the death penalty is concerned, you can never go back and fix that. What's done is done. You also put the case into a whole other appellate posture where there really is never an end. And I really think that victims' families need to be educated and understand that when you ask for the death penalty in this case, your conviction is going to be attacked at every single level for decades.
Yes.
And you will continue to have this in your life as a result. And I think that people need to know that and understand that. We also need to acknowledge that it's completely not cost effective if that's what our goals are. We need to acknowledge that the deterrent effect is completely non-existent. And we need to kind of move forward in our philosophies of criminal justice.
Yeah.
Now, I'm also going to tell you that I handled death penalty cases when I was a prosecutor in Miami-Dade County. I can think of one that I can tell you. Life in prison was not enough for this person. And that is a case that changed me as a human being. And I've seen circumstances where I've felt that life was not enough. But I also recognize that as a civilized society, taking a life, I don't believe is what we should be doing in our system. Now, with that being said, I have the ability to rise above my own personal opinion and to apply the law as is necessary for me to conduct my duties as the state attorney. I will make these decisions as a committee with, again, the same type of multifaceted approaches: psychology, social work, educators, in addition to criminal justice professionals and lawyers. And we will make well-reasoned decisions that will have fleshed out all the facts before we make the determination that that type of a penalty should be applicable in a case. I think you're going to see a significant reduction in the application of the death penalty in Broward County as a result. And I will use the death penalty sparingly when the factors that statutorily require it are present.
Okay. All right. So we talked about all the, I think all of the issues that I wanted to address. So tell us, what is your vision for the office? Because one of the things that we're also realizing is that we need to be innovative in how we're moving forward, right? Because everything is, things are changing regularly. The way we were doing things in the past, it's a new day. Things are not gonna, this young generation is not gonna allow it, right? They're just not gonna let things remain the status quo. So what kind of new and innovative ideas would you bring to the state attorney?
Well, you know what, Sandra, if everybody would like to take a look at my website, www.electteresawilliams.com, they're going to see my 10-point vision for the future of the county. It's short and sweet, but it pretty much covers many of the subjects that we've already talked about today. Number one, phase one is training. And bringing that implicit bias training to make sure that what we're doing is correct. But also our prosecutors really need to be trained on the law and how to conduct themselves at trial, because I've seen some work that causes me to question the representation of innocent victims. So we need training not just in the law, but in how to exercise discretion appropriately and to acknowledge implicit bias and correct it in our system. That in order to make any of that happen, we have to have a statistical database. We need to internally be monitoring what we are doing, and that is going to be my first implementation to a change in technology at our office. I expect that to be a massive endeavor. I really want to take like a metadata approach where we're looking at a whole bunch of different categories. Talking specifically about that difference between Haitians and Jamaicans and Bahamians and African Americans, Hispanics, whites, people that all of the different cultures we have in our communities, all of those factors need to be analyzed. And so we will be implementing that immediately. Again, we need to stop doing the same things over and over again that don't work. I'm sick and tired of having the Florida legislature tell me that they're not interested in spending the money to rehabilitate our youth and to fix our criminal justice system. We have amazing community-based programs that sit with beds empty and money going to waste because we're not integrating our criminal justice system but what we have available out in our neighborhoods, right where people have access to it. We need to integrate what we are doing with the community into our system, and we do that by using the pretrial diversion program. I'm going to be expanding this exponentially. The pretrial diversion program is going to probably address most low-level crime as well as third-degree felonies, pretty much across the board. Because what I really believe is, let's utilize our community-based programs. Let's get people the help they need. Let's give them a little bit of punishment so that they know not to come back. But we don't have to saddle them with a conviction that's going to prevent them from getting a job for the rest of their lives. So let's implement empowerment, rehabilitation into our punishment systems so that we are actually improving people's lives and helping them get back on track, rather than putting them into a spiral of a system that is geared towards failure and making them just another number in a private prison. You know, we need to overhaul our direct file system, as we talked about, because our youth is the most valuable asset that we have. We need to make sure that we are looking at expansive strategies that really implement meaningful rehabilitation, and that we're not just putting a Band-Aid on a problem. We touched upon, you know, one of the things we didn't talk about are some of the salary problems that we have at the Broward County State Attorney's Office, and keeping good lawyers. While we need to diversify, it's really hard to get talent to come over to the state attorney's office because of salaries. So I really hope that we're going to see some of the youth that are out protesting, being police officers and becoming prosecutors. And I want to foster that type of an environment to create that type of cultural change in our system. Like I said before, you know what? I am a person that I'm the person that's run the event. I'm the person who has run the organization. I'm the person who's run my own business, raised 2 kids, been a criminal justice advocate. You ladies know exactly who I am. And you also know that it's going to take a woman who has that skill set to make things actually happen in our courthouse. And so that is what I offer to this county. I think that I have got a skill set to invoke the respect of the people who've been part of this system and make them understand the need for change, make them see what I've seen and learn what I've learned. And it's that experience on both sides of the podium that I really feel makes me the best candidate to be your next state attorney.
Yes.
So I hope you'll take a look at the website. You know what? Right now, we need volunteers like crazy. I know that people are hit hard by the virus, but if you can make some phone calls for me or put your sign in the yard, please sign up to volunteer. We would so appreciate it. And if you haven't been hit by the virus at all, you know, financially is what we need the most. The good old boys are circling the wagons on this one and raising a lot of money for people. You know, the people who are making money in this system don't want to see me get elected. So I'm doing my very best, but I absolutely need your help. So if you can't volunteer, please try to tell as many people as you can in your family, your neighbors, your friends to please vote for me, and that you got to vote in August. The small race will be determined in August.
Yes, August 18, 2020 is the date of the primary election. Request your vote by mail ballots. That's browardsoe.org requested. I believe they did send out those the request for the vote by mail a couple of weeks ago. So you can actually use that card to update your signature and request your vote by mail ballot, because we don't know what's going to happen with COVID. So definitely do that. Go to browardsoe.org to request your vote by mail ballot. Even though you requested, that doesn't mean that you have to use it. You can still go in if on that day or during early voting you want to go in and vote. So we encourage everybody to definitely do that. Anything else you would want to add? So we talked about vote by mail, and the phone number if you want to request your vote by mail ballot and you don't have access to an internet, the number is 954-957-7500. That's the number to the SOE's office to request a vote by mail ballot. So we talked about child abuse, we talked about bias, juveniles, marijuana, the death penalty, and your vision, your programs that you want to implement in the office. Oh, this is the other thing I wanted to ask. Do you know if the state attorney's office presently have like someone that's a community liaison, or is that something that you would want to put in the office? Because we did talk about educating people and educating people at the office. I think it will be important to have someone or a person in the office or a few people in the office that does something like that, because that education piece is important.
Right. You know what, Sandra, part of my platform that I didn't get to talk about tonight is going to be talking about that collaborative prosecution approach. And I'm going to go into the areas that were hardest hit by crime, the zip codes that are hardest hit by crime in our community. And I'm hopeful to put a community prosecutor that grew up in that neighborhood. One of the things that I see is an extremely tight-knit community that is rooted in history in our county. We go back generations. And essentially, as a result, that's something that needs to be respected and nurtured. And so we need to take a different approach to how we go ahead and address that. And one of my goals is to basically develop in our local neighborhoods trial teams to foster and build the types of skills to bring those young people who know what it's like to be Black in Broward County, into our courthouse. And it is going to be those people who will help us to create the type of community relationships that are necessary for us to really take back our streets. And I feel I've seen this in action in the area of Coconut Grove in Miami-Dade County. I am so excited to really get in and implement this task force approach in the areas that are hardest hit by crime. And I am looking forward to, again, being a model for how you reduce crime as well as create meaningful criminal justice reform.
And I think that's important. It's definitely important to have that presence in the community. And sometimes you do have to meet people where they are, right? And you don't want their only experiences going to the courthouse is like when someone got in trouble and something is bad. They need to see them in a different light. And that whole idea of like having a trial team, that's something that's amazing. Like I said, I teach at a couple of the colleges around here, and I teach one class, a couple classes there where we do a trial at the end of the term. And I mean, the students just really like, they just love it. They learn how to make a opening statement, closing arguments, and they really, really get involved. And it's so funny that, the fact pattern is fake, but then they really start to believe it's true. And, they're zealously advocating for whatever position it is that they're having. So I think that would be like an amazing thing to do, is to bring something like that into the community.
You know what? The talent in the community is unbelievable. I get my mind blown on a regular basis when I go out into schools and meet the kids that are part of our community. Watching spoken word performance really has helped me to try to really understand a lot of what's going on. I can never have the experience of knowing what it's like. But wow, you know what? There's just so many amazing people that are in this county that are doing great work. Yes. That, you know what, I'm going to tap into all of our resources.
Amazing, because representation matters. They definitely need representation matters. They need to see someone that made it out of the neighborhood and that's just doing something great, So I think that's an amazing idea. So tell people how they can find you besides your website. What's your social media stuff? Let them know how they can get in touch with you.
Sure. I'm Teresa Fanning Williams for State Attorney on Facebook. It is Teresa W954 on Twitter. And again, that's www.electteresawilliams.com. I hope that you'll check out the website and sign up to volunteer. Sandra, I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity to talk about criminal justice and criminal justice reform. Anytime I get to do this, I'm excited. I could talk all day. But again, I'm hopeful to be given the opportunity to be your first female state attorney in the history of Broward County, and to be able to bring the type of experienced, balanced approach to criminal justice reform that's going to keep our community safe and bring us into the future. So thanks again, and Teresa.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So that's Teresa Fanning Williams for Broward County State Attorney.
Thanks, Sandra. Have a great evening.
18-2020.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Democratic Women's Club.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.